Previously on Thucydides' Trap. Whereas China in the national humiliation narrative zeroes in really on the weakness of the victim. Certifiably Braindead, Battle at Lake Changjin review. This film involves not much more than a small gang of Chinese soldiers armed with nothing but a few grenades, some potatoes and an ear trumpet, taking on the entire American army in Korea and pushing them back to the sea. This film I went to watch on Sunday, and it was with a lot of hope that I went to watch it. Looking forward to some good action sequences despite the rest. However, I had to declare that this film was utterly brain dead because it really defied all possibility of empathy whatsoever. But maybe that was the point, coming from a fascist state. So let's take a look at what made up Battle at Lake Changjin. So I was hoping, having watched various other party-backed films like Wolf Warrior 2 or Midway, for some big budget action sequences and some sort of likeable characters and general entertainment first. And I think with Wu Jing, you kind of expect he's a likeable guy, looking forward to him seeing him on screen. Similarly, Midway was kind of a sort of eyes open, brain off film, but still quite entertaining for its action sequences. I think where Battle at Lake Changjin differed from these pieces in that it was really sort of empty. It was just hollow. It was hard to empathise with almost anything that was going on, and at the same time it kind of lacked a narrative coherence to sustain the action, and even the action sequences themselves lacked a kind of inner spirit. It was kind of action for action's sake, and it just kind of felt hollow, is the best way to describe it. In reality, a lot of it felt like watching Starship Troopers, the 1990s satire of military sci-fi, where really you just have thousands of extras running to their deaths with no real appreciation for anything beyond the kind of higher nationalist mission of the state. And watching Battle at Lake Changjin really kind of felt like that. Just this sort of fascist, thoughtless film with no heart to it. But I suppose that was the point, as we'll analyse in a moment. But really, I think the elements were there. And I'm saying this, forget the sort of propaganda element. Americans can be bad guys too. Who cares? As long as it's like an entertaining film. But I felt it wasn't entertaining because it sort of showed a total lack of sympathy. Where does this fascist thing come from? I mentioned those other films earlier. I also went to see 800 last year, another sort of big budget Chinese film with some good action. In 800, it's, I would say, erring into the fascist genre that Battle at Lake Changjin has. But, and a perfect example there is where one of the characters, one of the soldiers, they go on a sort of short mission where they've got to swim underwater, avoid the enemy. And of the three, one of them stays underwater and drowns. And there's no subsequent follow-up to his death. The rest of the characters just sort of carry on as if he never existed. And I'd suppose that's the sort of first sign of fascism is, oh, someone's died, no one cares, let's just carry on. And then similarly with 800, you've got them throwing themselves out of the building to kind of protect things completely, with no human spirit, I think is the best way to describe it. To go into this mindlessness idea, and the reason I'm calling it brain dead, is for a variety of reasons, but it very much kind of ties into that fascist ideal of individualism subordinated to the collective goal, and kind of the fascist idea of like just getting the job done no matter what the cost. Who cares about who you are? Just do the job. To start off with, overall, it's an absence of narrative cohesion. Random scenes are spliced into a narrative coherent only by the fact that the film continues through these different scenes. There's no real sort of well sewn together idea. Particularly in a film, the idea is that you tie action into character, into plot. The three are all connected and it drives the picture forward. Here we've just had these sort of random scenes put together. And I hate to go into this, but certain films of Germany in the 1930s and 40s follow this idea where you just put cockroaches next to pictures of Jewish people and kind of put it together for the audience to associate, even though they have no natural narrative coherence. So effectively, I would argue the idea of being brain dead here is the inability of the brain to add up separate ideas together. In psychology, it's the idea of the fragmented mind. So this film displays that idea, the fragmented idea that we're just meant to sort of watch it and absorb without thinking. And I think it goes further. Changjin Lake goes further because it really emphasises that narrative disintegration, and you're just not meant to think. I mean, it's quite bizarre. Further, there's really a lack of characterisation, or the thinnest form of character growth and development. Wu Jin smiles once in the film, and he's got a cheeky smile that you like to see on camera. It makes you sympathise with him. Remember the great drinking competition scene back in Wolf Warrior 2? You kind of like the guy. Throughout the whole film, he was just effectively faceless. There was not much going on. Similarly, the story with his younger brother who joins him to go into battle. It didn't kind of... just didn't have something to it. Further, I know it's an action film, and I went to see it kind of willing to ignore just about everything else. Even the action sequences were devoid of a certain element of integration, a sort of characterisation. To take an example, there's the turkey shoot when Wu Jin and the lads are crossing rocks in the mountains, there's a sort of absence of tension because the pilots don't know they're there. The people crossing the rocks are just trying to hide out. And then the reason the Americans actually open fire is not because they've spotted the 7th Company crossing those rocks. It's just because they need to warm up their cannons on the planes. So they go on this shoot, shooting up the rocks, do end up killing some of the 7th Company. But there's no character going on. It's just this sort of action sequence for action's sake. Similarly, other of the big action sequences, like the attack on the kind of hill fort at night, full of a wealth of fantastic and entertaining sections. But as a whole, it just felt like one of those tanks they've got driving through the cottages there. It just steamrolled me out of enjoying it. I left with a sort of sense of numbness. Similarly, the final big action sequence where they attack the winter base, it's just kind of action for action's sake, and they heap it up on top of itself so that you'll kind of steamroll it into a brain-dead appreciation of what? You can spend a lot of money doing action sequences. Impressive. But anyone can kind of do that. Try and link it into character and development and growth. So it felt, in a way, it's just about sort of accomplishing the national goal, which, well, ironically, is maybe what they're trying to do. Let's not forget that China, communist state, although largely sort of fascist tactics now, since the 1990s, they've been brainwashing people into accepting the national humiliation narrative. There's almost a total absence of the individual over the collective, and a lack of thought. I mean, that's what the party wants. So, in a way, from their perspective, you could rate it extremely highly as 10 out of 10 for garbage propaganda. And I think the high box office ticket sales in China demonstrate that it's been a rip-roaring success, even though it's not a great film. It's really just kind of hollow and empty. And I suppose tying it back into those national humiliation narratives, a lot of it is about the Chinese who are sort of equipped with nothing more than a few grenades, some potatoes and an ear trumpet, of taking on the Americans, kind of against the odds. But it ties in with this whole victimization narrative of the national humiliation. There's no kind of reflection on, well, what does it take to be great? Some sort of thoughts on this. And admittedly, yes, it's an action film. We're not here for like a deeper thing. But it could at least delve into some of those issues. Anyway, as I've said, it's kind of mindless for a reason. Tellingly, as a propaganda piece, it kind of works. One of the biggest lines being, if our generation doesn't fight this war, then the next will have to, said towards the very end of the film. And I suppose as a propaganda piece for promoting the invasion of Taiwan and the undoubted suffering that will take place, it kind of ticks those boxes. But at the same time, it's a kind of disturbing insight into the hollowness of the Chinese mind. And that's why I have to rate this film as utterly brain dead. Let me know your thoughts.